Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Travel Coach Network podcast. It is I, Sahara Rose DeVore, the founder and CEO of the Travel Coach Network and the creator and instructor of the Travel Coach Certification Program. Today, I have Aleesha Patel. Aleesha is a purpose-driven consultant and coach. After 13 plus years of leading marketing teams at mission-driven startups and Fortune 100 companies, she now works directly with individuals and brands to help them achieve their potential. Aleesha currently lives in Miami and is a proud dog mom, amateur yogi, and a newfound minimalist after a 2-year road trip across 25 plus cities. Aleesha, thanks so much for joining us today on the TCN podcast.
Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Tell us, where did your passion for travel or that idea for you to pack up and start this 2-year long journey road trip?
Yeah, I will to admit it was actually not the plan to spend 2 years on the road. When COVID happened, our lease was coming up. My husband and I and our little dog Astro, we were based in San Francisco. And so we were like, let's just do 3 months in Southern California and we'll come back and find a new lease, a new apartment. And so we actually put all our stuff in storage, and that those 3 months actually turned into 2 years on the road. So it wasn't actually part of the plan to spend this much time on the road. But the love from travel comes from a really young age. Growing up in India, my parents always um, exposed me to travel, but have never done anything like this before. So this is definitely the first time, and a truly life-changing experience.
Was there any experiences during the road trip or any other journeys that you've taken in your lifetime that had a big impact on you or maybe transformed you in some way?
Yeah, I will say that the 2 years that we spend on the road have personally and professionally changed my life and our life together. I think, you know, as even though we were traveling during COVID, we made it a point to try and find cities where we at least knew like one person. And these could be friends from back home when we were growing up or new friends we had made once we moved here. But being able to see how people live differently in different cities was like a really big eye opener for me. I've always lived in big cities my whole life. So I grew up in Bombay, moved here for college, lived in New York, and then San Francisco. And a lot of these cities have hustle work culture kind of ingrained in them. Work is your identity. And it had been like that, it had sort of become part of my DNA, and I thought that was how you live. And so I think the travel really opened up my eyes and got me to realize like, wow, it doesn't have to be that way. And there's so much more to it. And the one really memorable experience was we were in Sedona, um, and we had a couple of friends who lived in Flagstaff, so not too far, and it was, midweek, and they were like, "Do you want to go for a hike?" And do you want to do this and that? And we're like, "Wow, like that's their day to day. Like they can go for a hike and then maybe do a couple hours of work." And it just like really got me to start thinking about like, okay, what is the life I want to be leading? Is this, at the time I was in a full-time job. I actually started a new job when I remember like signing the papers when I was in Sedona. And it got me thinking like, is this really how I want to be spending my time? I was working at startups, which meant like literally working around the clock. And so yeah, truly, truly transformational. And I think being exposed to different environments, different people helped me open up my eyes. And I'm still on my own journey of learning and trying to figure out like my own balance. But yeah, it was so transformational and impactful.
Yeah, one of the reasons why people travel in general is to, experience and learn about other cultures around this world. And within learning about other cultures or immersing into these other cultures, we absorb and learn about their different lifestyles, the traditions, the
Yeah.
customs. And so that really is something that can truly impact us. So we take these bits and pieces of what we learn and experience and whether they're different cultures around the world or different cities or locations within a certain country or place. Um, and we apply those pieces to ourselves and we figure out what do we
Totally.
want? How do I want to live? How do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? Do
Yeah.
I want my day to day to look like? I know for myself, like I I get a lot of inspiration and creativity and find joy when the fact that I work for myself, but when I go to different places and in warmer weather, I can spend a couple hours at the beach and
Mm.
feel recharged. I can go back to my laptop. I get different senses of inspiration and creativity versus being stuck at your computer, for a set amount of time, or, maybe it's just the surroundings that you're not inspired by. So I can totally understand and relate to that, especially a place like Sedona. I used to live in Arizona,
Mm.
and Sedona is just a beautiful place. And just being able to be outdoors and for hikes at different parts of the day is also just good for your brain and your, physical well-being too. And that's all really important in just your professional life, being the best you personally to be the best you professionally as well. Um,
Totally.
is there any other stories that you can think of or memorable
Oh yeah.
experience along the way, I'm sure, from having 2 years of a journey?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so many, and actually, so much of what you said resonated. We actually just got back. I'll go back to your question, but we just got back from a 2 week trip in Paris, and again, one of my favorite cities. And the one thing I took away from this most recent experience was like I observed how no one at their coffee shops is sitting with, the laptop open, eating, drinking, and doing work. It was like you're there to have coffee, you do that one thing and you do it well. And, there's the reminder of just again sort of pacing yourself and really like enjoying the experience. And I think here we're just so um encouraged to do the multitasking, and it was just such a reminder of like, wow, you don't need to be doing that. But yeah, to go back to your question, I think another one of our favorite cities, and actually where I'm calling in from, landed up being Miami. So to your point on warmer weather, um San Francisco was beautiful, but it was like fake warm. It was like the sun was out, but you don't actually feel warm. And so having grown up in India, I was like seeking warm weather. And we made our way across the country, and Miami happened to be one of our stops. And I think I had a very strong perception of Miami coming in. And so I had almost like written it off as like, I'm not gonna like it. Um, but after having actually spent time here, and we were doing like a month at least every place we were, so you truly get to know all sides of the city, and it shifted my perception. And this is home base now, so I'm actually calling in from Miami today. And to your point, like the warm weather, just the sunshine makes me happier every single day, and being able to embrace a just sort of different pace of life has been really welcoming, especially in this phase of life. So yeah, Miami was like really a wonderful experience where it honestly feels like we're not even in America, in the United States. There are days when, you hear more Spanish on the streets, and people actually, take time to have a conversation, and it's not about work. And I think that was another sort of reminder, like when we were here, no one asks you what you do. And I was so used to that being the first or second question. I actually had to change my own narrative, like, oh, when I'm meeting people, like, how do I actually want to get to know them, work aside? And that's also been like a really transformation, like learning experience. And I encourage, like, and I appreciate the same in return. So yeah, Miami has definitely been one of the wonderful sort of discoveries in a new way, along our adventure.
Yeah, the US is so diverse in its regions, states, cities, like the amount of diversity that we have here among our cultures, our languages, just everything. It really does. You go to different parts of the states and you feel like you're in a different country, sometimes a different world. Like it's just so different. Dialects,
Totally.
everything too. I mean, I'm from the States and still like I'm always in awe of like how different every part of the US is.
Yeah.
When it,
And I think the diversity also extends to just like, the energy of the place, and like the personality. Like each city has its own personality. And so, being such a vast country and such a diverse country, it's like you can truly, like, if you allow yourself, like, find the place that resonates most with you. And it doesn't have to be the forever place, but it's like, at least for us, it's been like what's resonating most right now. But yeah, I completely agree. And it was the first time I got to travel so much across the country, because as I said, I'd really only lived in, like, the two, like, New York and SF for like school and work. And this was the first time where work didn't dictate like where I live. It was more like, what do we want as individuals, as partners, and where do we want to live as humans?
Yeah, it's really powerful what travel can do for us as a whole, even if it's just within one country, what you can learn from the different cultures and lifestyles. And even to your point of talking about how, in Miami, it's not part of people's narrative to ask, what do you do versus in a place like Silicon Valley or maybe New York, where we're so
Right.
hustle and bustle driven. And it allows you to figure out, how do I want to build relationships, not only
Yeah.
relationship with myself, but also relationships with others. Like, how do I get to know
Yeah.
people on a deeper level other than what we kind of define ourselves and we often do that with what we do in our role or what company we work
Yeah.
for. So, and we don't find that in many other countries. I think that's one of the reasons why traveling, we get so addicted to meeting new people is always like one of the top reasons people say they want to travel is to meet new people. Well, we can meet new people in our own hometown or our own, city, but going to different cultures and meeting people outside of where our norm is gives us different perspectives and new ideas that we aren't really exposed to otherwise. So I love that you brought that
Yeah.
up because we forget about that sometimes. We're just in our own
Yeah.
routine, in our own ways that we can just learn so much from one another.
Yeah. Totally. And it's almost like when you're in this like new environment, I think it's always like harder to do the things when you're like in your comfort zone, versus like when you're in this new environment. It's almost like it gives you permission to maybe like try new things, do new things, meet new people. So
Mhm.
yeah, I agree with you.
So you talked about how your 2-year road trip inspired your mindset professionally, but you spent this time with your husband. Travel can really help us deepen our relationships, strengthen our bonds, teach us about one another. Is there anything that this trip did for you in your relationship or anything that it made you realize? Because it's very different living on a road
Yeah.
versus living, the day to day in a home.
Yeah, totally. Um, I think for both of us, we like realize like how little we actually need in terms of materialistic things. And I think, you just land up collecting stuff, like just like stuff, right? And being on the road, like we each had our own suitcase and one little carry-on for our dog, and that was it. And um you learn to enjoy each other's companies in like different ways, because you are spending a lot of time on the road. It was like um whether it was like depending on what you're listening to, while you're driving, and like making certain compromises. But what felt like compromise maybe initially, like I remember at the beginning, like I would not be so open to listening like some of the podcasts like he wants to listen to. But by the end of it, like like my taste almost evolved, or like my mind was sort of expanded in certain ways, and sort of appreciated a lot of what he was sharing. And then, as I mentioned, like we did a lot of this travel during COVID, and especially the first year or first few months of the travel, like it was literally just us, because it wasn't you weren't able to really meet other people even where we were visiting. And so it was like finding almost like the simple joys back again. And it kind of reminded me of like when we were growing up without, and now maybe I'm dating myself, but like we grew up like without phones and like smartphones, and you know uh and you kind of had to learn how to just like entertain yourself in some way. And we spent a lot of time outdoors, with each other, hiking just in nature. And like to your point, like I think our relationship got a lot more deeper, a lot more real. And I think as I said, like I evolved and he was evolving too as an individual and is on his own path of transformation. So it was actually really beautiful now that I'm thinking about it. It's like, like we evolved together, but then we also like involved like as individuals. And I think much stronger as like a partnership now than we were before. And it also is like, gosh, if you can do that, you can kind of survive anywhere together. So yeah, I think we just like deepened our understandings of ourselves, what we value and what we value as a team,
Mhm.
and what we're looking for in life.
Yeah, I mean, I traveled solo, but there was times where I, traveled with friends or I met up with friends or, I had my mom come visit me and her and her friends. And it really does, you learn so much about one another and you gain a new appreciation for people. You learn what you're capable of and strengths and weaknesses. And because you get put in, vulnerable situations, problem
Yeah,
solving, just things that you maybe wouldn't have to face in the day-to-day normal life, quote unquote. Um, so not only do you, like you said, you learn so much about yourself and evolve yourself, but as a couple too, you just, and then creating these memories, these, experiences
yes,
that you can talk about for a lifetime that you can, reminisce on. And, it just builds character within yourself, but then character within your own relationships too. There's a lot of travel coaches in the Travel Coach Network who focus on couples travel or family travel,
mm,
um, even solo travel, getting out of your comfort zone and connecting with people to be able to understand them deeper and build these really meaningful connections versus maybe we, you know, collect friends or maybe we, have surface level relationships with our coworkers, but we really learn through travel to, ask deeper questions because you have the time and you have the, it's the environment sometimes too that we're
yeah,
faced where we just kind of open up a bit more too. So travel really is
yeah.
such a really powerful tool for relationships as a whole.
Yeah, and you're actually reminding me, like, not every two people have the same sort of travel style or like the pace at which they want to be doing things when you travel. And I think so it was also like calibrating or like revisiting that, at least for us to sort of more like be more in tune with each other of like, okay, what is it like you're looking for? Like, what's the kind of pace? And I think that's helped establish like an understanding it with that context too. So luckily we are more similar than different, but it also, everyone does have their own travel style, like how much you want to pack into a day, or like even if it's extended travel, like how much you want to do on weekends, or how do you want your weekdays to look. So it's like almost like revisiting like the norms of how you want to live, especially when you are doing these extended periods of travel,
Mhm.
and not sort of taking anything for granted, right? And having those conversations, obviously it was like took learning and sort of like figuring it out, but I think it's um yeah, to your point, it's just like kind of putting yourself in the beginner mindset, but like in a different way, and lots of learning that comes with it.
Yeah, we're always learning through travel, even because every place, every scenario, every situation is different. I know for myself, every time that I went on a solo trip, I packed that backpack and I stepped into the airport, I was a different persona.
Mm,
And then when I got home, I was like, who is that person? How did she do it? And that leads me into a question of, what you guys do is not easy. And I'm sure there's a lot of couples or just people in general, individuals who are like, I could never do what they did, or,
I
I
was
need
that. I
structure
was
and
that.
stability. How did you
Yeah.
navigate those limiting beliefs, or what are some of the other fears and limiting beliefs you've had people
Yeah.
ask you or say to you?
Well, I was that person, I'll admit that. So it was my husband who proposed the idea, and my initial reaction was like, no, like, how can we do this? And I think what was limiting was just, I think also I'm more of a creature of habit, and so I like my routine and in my comfort zone. And so when it was first brought up, I was like, gosh, like where will I work? That was literally probably like my biggest question at the time, which is kind of so ridiculous now that I'm thinking back to it. It was like, will I have a desk? How will I be able to like perform and like optimize the work that I'm needing to do and show up in the way that I need to show up. And there was also the, like the schedule that like the routine that I had in terms of like workout or like um how will we make sure we're getting like the groceries, or like it was just like questioning like these like small things. And I think what helped me at least was like, because we started off as like this is just gonna be like 3 months and it's not gonna actually be that long. And then I think it was as I settled in and realized like you can kind of do what you're doing anywhere. And I was fortunate. I feel like I should say that like, we were both really lucky to be able to work remotely. And so it was, you kind of just were doing similar things during the day, but in different sort of environments. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's like you realize like how much weight you were putting on some things like doesn't actually matter. And humans are so resilient. Like we can make things work if you want it to work. And you learn how to like respect each other. And like to what you were saying, like, there were some places we stayed which were like small apartments, and like we were both like working at the same time. So it's like, okay, making sure like our schedules align, where it's like if I'm gonna be on a live call, like he knows in advance, or like vice versa. So you learn to communicate better. Um, but yeah, I think the main like barriers initially were like, I'm not gonna have like, my uh uh cooking like utensils. It's like you'll figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
you figure out like what you really need. Like you don't need all of these pans. Like you just need the one. Like you kind of like learn like your basic needs and you make the most of it. And yeah, I think I want like really further along, we like land up buying one of those really inexpensive like things you can prop up to put your laptop on. But for so long, we were just kind of making do with like whatever you kind of found in, whether it was books or stacks of boxes or whatever, to create those, ideal work environments.
Yeah, it's so true. I remember so many times, like in my own solo travel journeys, just like whether I needed to like heat something up or, eat or, do work for myself, like you'll figure it out. You'll find resources, tools, like,
Right.
it's all about flexibility. And sometimes, it's those challenges too add to the memories, the conversations, the
Yeah.
the experience as a whole, and also shows you what, again, you're capable of. I think we get very used to having everything at our hands. And that's why one of the reasons why I love traveling so much. I've been to so many
Yeah.
different countries that, we gain a new appreciation for what we have and gratitude. And then also appreciation
Totally.
for like what we don't have too. And, places all around this world have less than what we're used to, and we take things for granted. And
Yeah.
I remember coming back to, as soon as I get on a plane and coming back home, I'm like, wow, I'm glad I have a functioning toilet, or I have accessible toilet paper, or, clean water all the time, versus, when you're challenged on the road that you have to figure things out. It's travel itself just opens our eyes to so many different things, no matter where we are in this world.
Totally. I feel like we didn't, really like rough it out, I would say, in our travel. Like we were, typically finding like different Airbnbs as we go.
Yeah, I
And,
mean, you traveled within the US, so it's not,
and
you know.
that's what I was going to say within the US. But to your point, like still there's so much we do take for granted. And, when you're
Mhm.
in your own home, as I said, you like collect all this stuff that you don't actually need, but in your mind, it's like, I need this, I need this, I need this. But then when you come down to it, like we were each able to fit everything in like a suitcase each, versus like all of the boxes that we had like put in storage. And yeah, so you just like learn to live much more like minimalistically and like value then more what you have.
Mhm. Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I can relate a lot. We're going to take a little bit of a shift here. So we talked about your trip, but you have an extensive background in marketing and branding, and there's a lot of travel business owners who listen to this podcast. Can you give a couple tips that you could share with our listeners when it comes to branding or marketing?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the work that I've done, titles aside, it's always sort of the common thread has always been like starting with a really deep understanding of who your consumer or customer is. And if you're new to the space, like who is that ideal consumer customer? And it's really like with that deep understanding and empathy for that person or profile, use that to then like drive a lot of your own messaging and branding. I think so that's on like one side. It's like using that understanding and then doing similar deep work to understand like who you want to, like what is why are you creating this brand? Like what is the motivation? What is your unique like value? And then it's like coming together, and that intersection really is where the magic happens. And it's, I think often instead of like jumping to just like taking action or like I think like people jump to tactics of like, how do I get the word out there? Like spend a little bit of time. It doesn't have to be as extensive on like coming up with that narrative of like your business. So it is, thinking about like, who is your customer? Like, who are you targeting? What it is that you're providing? What makes you unique? There are so many businesses out there that support travelers. So why would someone want to work with you versus another person? Um, and like then coming like it's like stitching that together and then like bringing that to life. And when you start with that customer in mind, it helps you make sure like whatever you're putting out there is going to resonate with them, and it's going to stand out to them. So that's like immediately what's coming up. But I'm curious if there are like, what are sort of the top challenges or questions that folks have, because I'm newer to that space.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those are great tips. Those are spot on. I know we talk a lot about that within the Travel Coach Network and our certification program is like, you have to understand who your ideal client is or who you are targeting. Because what I see in the travel space is, travel experts say, well, everyone loves to travel. I can just market to everyone. And, strategically from a business standpoint, that's
Yeah,
not effective. That's not going to work. So,
yeah,
building your brand when you're talking about like, what is your where does your why come from? It's all, crucial because travel is so unique to each and every one of us. Travel means
yeah,
something different to all of us. Travel has impacted us or transformed us or, given us a aha moment in our life for some different reason. We've all traveled for different reasons. And so therefore we automatically as a default are going to have unique businesses and brands, but you have to be strategic in how you put that out there. So I know some of the questions that I've had my members and audience have over the years is like, well, what do I really talk about when putting themselves
mm,
out there when it comes to marketing? Because the travel industry has been very set in its ways when it comes to its
mm,
marketing. We see book now, look at the beautiful beach and the palm trees, like visit here, but that
mm,
means nothing to nobody. So how do you, they want to know, like, what do I talk about? How do I put myself out
mm.
there? And what are some tips that you would have on, getting started on becoming more visible?
Yeah, I mean, I think it again like starts with like putting yourself in like those customer shoes of like, what do they want to hear? Where are they, right? Like, so, depending on the customer profile that you're targeting, it could look and feel very different. But if I had to just put myself in my own shoes, it's like someone like me, I'm spending, time on Instagram. Referrals or recommendations from folks I trust is really important. Um, if I come across something, I will likely sign up for someone's like newsletter. And so I've just mentioned like, three potential channels of like, maybe thinking about like, if you're going to do social media, which channel is the best fit for your customer? You don't have to do them all, right? Like recognizing like start small, but do it really well. So if your customers on Instagram versus TikTok, focus on Instagram. It may be that your customer is more on TikTok, like I don't know, but like focus on that one thing. If you know your customer is more likely to read email, read newsletters, like invest in that. But if you don't have that insight, try and get that insight before you invest in the channel. Because I know how much effort it is to invest in these channels. And I think sometimes our tendency is like, let's just do it all, right? But my guidance would be like, take a step back and really ask. your ideal customer. Like ask the customers you have, and if you don't have customers, try and reach out. Even if you talk to like 3 or 5 people, like that should just be like a really good starting point to understand like where are they actually learning, like how are they making their travel decisions, and then try and prioritize like your channel strategy to be in front of them and like start to get into that consideration set. The other thing that's coming to mind is like I think there's like research that, and this is like known, I think it's like you need 7 touches or something, or 6 to 7 touches before a consumer like actually makes the purchase decision. So understand like how long, like what does that journey look like when someone is planning travel? Like for some people, like they plan like a year out. Some people are much more like, all right, I have like in 2 weeks, I have some time, I'm gonna jump. So understand like who like is your customer more of like an impromptu traveler or like a planner, and then know when you need to start building that relationship with them. So understanding sort of that the buyer journey or like the traveler's like decision journey of like when do people, how do they make decisions, where are they learning things, and then using those insights to really like inform your channel strategy. And yeah, don't do it all, like start small, really like own your niche or like win in those specific channels before you start to branch out. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense because a lot of times people want to feel like they have to show up everywhere. I have to be present on every platform, but not only is that really overwhelming and frustrating, but it's also not effective. You're not going to put out quality content, and also not every
Right.
your ideal clients are not on every platform, like you were saying. So
Yeah.
those are all really, really great tips. Aleesha, I'm going to be mindful of our time here, but I want to thank you so much. Is there anywhere that people can follow you, and did you document your journey in any way?
Yeah, you know what? I did not actually. It's here and it's on my phone, but people can find me. I have my website aleeshapatel.com. It's focused on, the coaching business that now I am leaning into, which is a big part of, coming out of the travel. I'm really leaning into coaching. So yeah, people can find me at aleeshapatel.com, and I hope this was helpful for your community. I had a joy sort of sharing my experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I always ask towards the end of every episode, is there a fun fact about yourself that you could share with our listeners? And it doesn't have to be business or travel related.
Yeah, so I was actually thinking about this, and the fun fact or like embarrassing fact is actually I don't know how to drive. And so we did the whole trip with my husband driving, and yeah, and people will not know that because I'm like, gosh, we did this whole big road trip. I just have this really big fear of driving. I've gotten my learner's permit twice and haven't the test as yet. And I thought wherever we land up next, I'll learn. But we got to Miami and people are like very aggressive drivers here. So now I'm like, no, thank you. So that's my fun, very personal fact that I'll share. So, that's another thing. Like, don't let it stop you. Like, there are ways to do it.
Mhm.
If you want to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a lovely chat, and you offered so much inspiration and value in today's interview, Aleesha. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, everyone, please be sure to follow us on Instagram at the Travel Coach Network. Come learn more at thetravelcoachnetwork.com. We look forward to having you in our TCN Global Community on Facebook. You can find the link for that and your free beginner's guide to travel coaching in the show notes. If you know anyone who may be interested in travel coaching, please be sure to send them our way to our podcast. We truly appreciate that. And until next time, my fellow wanderers, bye for now.